Dricus played this press conference very well. Not only the trash talking to Adesanya, but also playing against the crowd. He knows that they're going to favor Adesanya. So he's telling them that they're going to cry when Adesanya loses. And he played it with the whole rugby thing as well, because I think South Africa won, right? Or one of their teams that I don't understand rugby too well. And speaking of crying, Adesanya did get emotional up there. He did start crying. It does show that Dricus' trash talk is very effective. And it's going to be interesting on which version of Adesanya we're going to get, because we know that he's motivated to beat Dricus, as well as going into the fight emotional. But Adesanya has been emotional in a fight before, when he fought Pereira the second time, I believe, and when he fought Paulo Costa. It wasn't the exact same emotion. He was upset or angry with his opponent in those fights, and he won both of those fights by knockout. But then when you saw him fight Strickland, where he was upset going into that one as well, Strickland dog walked him the whole fight. It's funny because Adesanya did say that he's embarrassed to lose to Strickland. He was embarrassed with the way he performed. We'll see, man. If he beats Dricus, he gets a chance to fight Strickland and prove any doubters wrong about his performance that night. So Adesanya has never really fought differently because of trash talk or being emotional before. But he's never been this emotional going into a fight. Dricus made him cry, which I think is the first for a press conference. It's always hard to predict how a fighter is going to perform due to them being emotional. Sometimes the fighters get thrown off, they get super aggressive in the fight and then get knocked out or submitted or something like that. But sometimes being emotional can actually strengthen a fighter. We saw that in Cody Garbrandt when he fought Dominic Cruz. In fact, Dominic Cruz even said so after the fight, that making Cody Garbrandt emotional made him a sharper fighter out there. But then what do you say about the TJ Dillashaw fights? Maybe because they actually knew each other, so it was a bit different. But that goes hand in hand with the whole emotional aspect of a fight, so it's hard to know. It's impossible to know until they step into the cage. And speaking of crying, there was also Mateusz Gamrot. Every time they asked him a question, Mateusz was just like in Terminator mode. He was like, I'm gonna make my opponent cry. I'm going to kill him. I will destroy him. Like, he was just going on this like Terminator kind of talk, and watching he just wrestles Dan Hooker into a decision. But Dan Hooker was just loving it all, happy, playing with the crowd, acknowledging how good his opponent is, how good everybody in the top 5 is. And also Steve Erceg was loving it. I mean, he seems like a guy who's finally realizing his dream. As he said it, coming out to the hometown, the crowd cheering his name. Just happy to be there, grateful to be there, going up against the best fighters in the world, proving his skills on the grand stage. Steve Erceg is the GOAT, man. Tai Tuivasa also just happy to be there, hoping him and Jairzinho Rozenstruik are going to have a battle where they're both going for the knockout and stuff. He said he's preparing for a 3-rounder though. At this stage of his career, he kind of has to have that mindset, but if the knockout presents itself, of course he's going to go for the finish. And he was pretty funny where Dricus and Adesanya were arguing with each other, and I think Adesanya said something about the land, and Tai Tuivasa was like, hey, this is my land, just to let everybody know where they're at. Now, for those wondering why Adesanya got upset, when Dricus brought up things about servants and stuff like that, well, there was an interview a year ago or 2 years ago or something, where Adesanya said that he grew up with servants that used to like wash him and stuff when he was back in Nigeria. So when Adesanya was talking about the land and he brings the belt wherever he goes and stuff, Dricus said, are you going to bring the servants with you? That was what he was referring to, because in some of the interviews leading up to this fight, Adesanya's been talking about how his upbringing was very tough and stuff like that, but in the past he was talking about how he had servants. So Dricus is using some of the stuff that Adesanya has said before as a way to get under his skin. Dricus has talked about it before. He said they're in the fight game. These guys are looking to punch each other in the face. Words are not going to make him rattle. It's not supposed to make any fighter rattle. They're all in there to physically beat each other up, even to the point they're willing to unalive each other out there, because they have to be in that sort of mentality. Dricus probably doesn't care personally, but he will say these things if it helps him win the fight. Friends, say what you will about Dricus' trash talking, but the guy is effective. He got in Sean Strickland's head, and he also got in Adesanya's head. Now, it doesn't mean that the fighter is going to get thrown off in the fight. Dricus got Strickland so upset that Strickland fought him in the crowd. But in the fight itself, Strickland fought focused. We've seen this kind of thing with Leon Edwards and Colby Covington. Well, Leon didn't get deterred from the trash talking either, so it's going to be interesting to see if Adesanya fights emotional or not. But as we've seen with the higher level fighters at the championship level, they usually fight composed regardless. Even Cody Garbrandt back in the day when he fought Dominic Cruz, who's a very emotional fighter. And for Dricus, it's nothing personal. He's taking this all as competition. He's chasing a legacy to rack up title defenses, to be the best fighter in the world, and beat the fighter that he said he respects in there, Israel Adesanya, to establish himself as one of the best middleweights of all time. Whereas Adesanya's motivation is a bit different. After he cried, he said he wanted to crush Dricus' dreams. Now, that sounds like he's going to get emotional in the fight and lose himself, potentially getting finished by Dricus. That can absolutely happen. A fighter drawing motivation on specifically beating a certain opponent can be a bit of a double-edged sword. Now, it has worked before with Alex Pereira. Pereira came back into MMA because he was motivated by Israel Adesanya. Doesn't mean he was motivated to beat Adesanya or to prove Adesanya wrong, or two different things. Because he is continuing his legacy as the light heavyweight champion. So it could make Adesanya very focused in this fight specifically to defeat Dricus Du Plessis, but on the other hand, he could become very tunnel visioned and not see the broader picture where Dricus is a lot more aware. Dricus is not going to get emotional in the fight at all. He's going to fight just like he always does. He's focused at the task at hand and being the best fighter he can be while also beating Adesanya with the best of his abilities. So it's going to be interesting on which Adesanya we're going to see out there. An Adesanya who's very aggressive, trying to get the knockout, or an Adesanya who's fighting composed from range, looking to counterpunch, a more methodical game plan on beating Dricus' aggressive style. But that's interesting though. Dricus was the one that said that he wants to look for the finish in the fight. He said if the opening for the finish doesn't present itself, he's going to force the finish out of Adesanya. Now, as the great Chael Sonnen once said, when a fighter looks for a finish, they tend not to get it. When the fighter isn't looking for the finish, that's when it usually happens. And it sounds like Dricus is going to be very aggressive in the fight. Go forward, throw big punches maybe, or shoot takedowns right away. And that's the kind of style that I think Adesanya wants out of Dricus than to be thrown off of a slower pace, a bit more complacent kind of style, right? Because if you run forward into the counterpuncher, that usually tends to play into their game. And what did Adesanya mean when he was calling him a pig? Was he calling him a pig fit? Something like that? It was hard to tell what he was saying. But he said it like multiple times when he was upset and Dricus was talking about how he's the first African champion living in Africa and nothing could change that because it's fact. Adesanya was calling him something pig something. I don't know. So the fight has gotten a lot more interesting now. The fight was lacking a lot of promotion and this press conference delivered. So it's going to be interesting on how both fighters show up in their fights. Will Dricus use the trash talking as an opportunity to wrestle Adesanya immediately where Adesanya probably thinks that Dricus is going to strike with him a bit? Is Adesanya going to show up a bit more aggressive looking for the knockout, which could run him into takedowns, potentially making an easier fight for Dricus? Or will Adesanya still be calculated out there? But does this sway my prediction? Because I did have it very slightly for Adesanya. I'm going to keep my prediction as it is, but I do think Dricus probably has an edge over Adesanya in that press conference. I do think stylistically Adesanya should be able to beat Dricus, but the mental part of a fight is very important. So we'll see if Adesanya comes out there and just is way too reckless. Dricus takes him to the ground and submits him or something, or even knocks him out. It goes to show you how good Dricus' trash talking actually is. But if Adesanya comes out there and wins, it goes to show you how strong Adesanya is mentally. But one thing I do know from this press conference, Steve Erceg is the best, and I hope he becomes champion, man. I hope the fight with Adesanya and Dricus is at least exciting. I hope it's entertaining. We know how some Adesanya fights go, and hopefully Dricus brings the fight forward to actually make it somewhat exciting. And hopefully we see a contender version of Adesanya when he was actually getting knockouts and not just jabbing and leg kicking people to a decision. And leave the comments below, what do you guys think of the press conference? What would you score that for Dricus? Because he obviously won the press conference. I give it like a 10-8 maybe. And I'll see you guys in the next video.